Hello and welcome back to our How to Paint a Dreadnought series. Today we're actually probably going to be finishing up. We're going to start off with a little bit of basing. We're going to jump right in with this Vallejo earth texture line. There's a couple of different kinds. I feel like the best kind of contrast we'll get is with the sand texture though. So we're going to go ahead and give that a bit of a whirl. You don't have to be very gentle with your brush here. You want a very liberal application, and we're just going to jump right in, just slathering it all over the model. Kind of get as much coverage as you can. Don't worry about getting out on the feet too much. If it's too bad, we can scrape it off or just paint over it, but you kind of want it to be on the feet a little bit. I feel like it kind of gives the impression like he's been walking through the desert, like he's getting stuck in it a little bit. We'll do our best here to kind of get into all those little nooks and crannies around his toes, I guess you can call them. And don't worry if it spills over the edge too much. Once this dries, it's actually very gritty. It's kind of chunky, so you can actually scrape it off just with your nail or with like a hobby knife or something. And if you really want to, look at that, you can even do it while it's drying. It comes off very easily. But if you even really wanted to, you can paint over it black as well, just along the rim. That way there's absolutely no trace that you messed up in the first place at all. And this stuff is actually very cheap. I'll probably put a link to it in the description. I know Games Workshop has their own technical paint for sand, but I just felt like this is a little bit more gritty. I use Sterling Mud quite a lot in my other videos. Anyone who's seen that knows that I'm a big fan of Sterling Mud as a technical paint, but it's more viscous than normal paint. It has a lot more volume, but there isn't any grit in it. And I feel like that's what I really want to make this pop. So I opted for the Vallejo this time. Sorry, James Workshop. Please forgive my heretic ways. This stuff is very cheap though. It was like 10 bucks, maybe 15 bucks for an entire, I don't know what you call that, container of it, I guess. And I've done maybe 3 or 4 kind of smaller bases, and I've barely even touched the surface of how much is in the container. So it's something that's going to last me for quite a while. And I mean, for 15 bucks, that's kind of a deal, right? Especially if you get it on Prime, you get that free shipping, right? And you can see kind of where it's a little bit black still. We're gonna let this dry a little bit, and then I'm gonna come back and do another layer. And it also, what I really like about this is that you can see, maybe, there we go. It's very gritty, it's very rough, and it gives you a really nice kind of texture without having to do any extra steps. And once this dries, it takes usually about 30 to 45 minutes with these larger bases. We will be coming back in with a wash. That way we can get kind of a little bit more of a kind of battlefield ridden kind of texture. Maybe some like oil soaked into certain parts of it. Just something to give it a lot more depth. So I'm going to let this dry a little bit. We'll do a bit of a jump cut, and once it's dry, we'll come back and we'll finish up. Alright, now that we've let our base dry a little bit, I did go ahead and do a second layer. And we're going to move on to the next step, which is trying to make kind of the feet blend in more naturally. You can see now it just looks like I was very sloppy. So we're going to try to do a little bit of dry brushing using our rack white. And we're going to make it look, if I can shake this up a little bit, kind of like our entire legs are covered in this sandy dust. Alright, now that I was able to locate my dry brush, we will just go ahead and get our paper towel. It's much easier if you have one that's already has some paint on it. If you're doing white, that way you can actually tell how much you have left on your brush. And we're going to take just a majority of that pigment off. And we're going to go in here, you don't have to be very clean about this, and we're just going to cover the kind of feet as best as we can. You don't have to be precise, you don't have to be clean, you just want to get good coverage. might actually have to go and get some more on our brush here. The problem with dry brushing is I feel like a lot of it gets wasted. You're just constantly having to add more to your brush and just rubbing it off. I'm sure there's a way to circumvent that, but I haven't really figured it out yet, so let's get right back in here. And don't even worry about getting like the top of the legs here. You can, be just a bit messier. It kind of gives you more of a natural vibe if you just blend it upwards. And some of it's hard to reach back in these little nooks and crannies, especially because I'm using a larger brush, but we're going to do the best we can to just get everywhere we can reach. And now that we've done a little bit of dry brushing, it's looking a little bit more natural on the feet there. And we're going to move on to the next step, which is making the actual sand itself look a little bit better. You can use either Nuln Oil for this or Agrax Earthshade, depending on kind of the how dark you want the sand to be. We're going to be using Agrax. It's my personal favorite. And we will get ourselves set up here. Try not to peek the microphone too much, as always. And we'll be using a larger brush for this. There's going to be a lot of coverage that we're trying to get. And we'll just go ahead and get our brush nice and lathered up. And again, you don't have to be very clean about this. You just want to get very nice coverage going here. And just kind of as well as you can. Just, make it even, spread it out a little bit. I might actually have to just go straight into the paint pot here. We're not getting too much retention there on the lid. Say what you will about GW's paint pot designs. They work a lot of the time. But with their shades and their contrast paints, they do kind of falter a little bit. I find that they don't work as intended. So we're just going to get all of that on our palette here and go right back in. Don't worry about, you can see like the brush strokes, we'll blend that in later. We just want to make sure we get our base fully covered here. And you can actually do kind of a mix and match with Nuln Oil and Agrax just to kind of give yourselves different shades and tones in the sand here. But for all intents and purposes, we're just going to be using Agrax all over. And this kind of gives you kind of a muddy, like dirty sand kind of look. Maybe your Dreadnought is leaking oil, or maybe the battlefield is already burnt and charred from missiles or something, right? Just gives you kind of more of a realistic feeling when you look at the base. And don't worry about covering the feet there. It kind of helps you blend. And make sure we get into all those little nooks and crannies. Thankfully, with a wash like this, it does tend to find its way into recesses very well. It's kind of the point of it normally, besides using it for shading purposes here. Perfect. And you might notice that I have a little bit of a mess going on around the outer rim of the base, right? But we're going to take care of that in just a second. If you have a buildup of that sand texture, which is very easy to do, I find the easiest way to take care of it is just using either like a file or your hobby knife and just kind of scraping away at it. It won't take all of it off unless you really work for it, but it will kind of take off the majority. Try not to peek the microphone again as I close that. And unfortunately I just got that all over my hand. That's fine. We won't worry about that too much. We do want to move on to our next paint though, which is going to be Abaddon Black. And this is just for cleaning up kind of the base of our model here. Give this a nice little shake. And if you have a brush that has a kind of curve on the back of it, this is going to be just like our edge highlighting. It just helps you kind of do it a little bit easier. It's a bit cheaty, but it's a really nice and easy method. So with our Abaddon Black, we're just going to get a little bit on our brush. Make sure that we don't have too much before we go and apply it here. And just around the entire rim of the base, we're going to be doing a kind of awkward angle here, using the back of your brush just as well as you can to not get anything around the kind of portions where you want the sand to be. And it might take you 1 or 2 layers for this. I find Abaddon Black usually it's very easy to keep thin and to get a single layer application on. But as we kind of get into the more kind of messy areas on the rim here, you can see I'll probably have to do a second pass. That's fine. Unfortunately, I don't have a kind of model holder big enough to make this easier for me. So we're going to be kind of dancing around this while it's drying as we attempt to kind of paint the rest of our model. And we're going to be reaching some of the smaller details. There's a couple of lenses. There's some of the little lights that I need to cover still. And even the missiles I haven't touched yet. So we're going to be working on all of that in just a second here. And you can see already that base of the model is looking so much better. We will do a second pass later on, but for now, that's looking pretty good. And off camera, I did do kind of a lot of cleanup detail, just using Balthazar Gold. If I could get our model actually on camera there, just using Balthazar Gold and going back over kind of all the smaller details we've already hit before. Same thing with our lead belcher. Just kind of want to make sure that we were set and ready to record, so I did all of that without having to bother you guys with it. But it's all stuff we've done before already, in this series even, so it's nothing too crazy. And I am going to be going into our corn red here as we start working on our missiles. And actually we have some kind of wires and cords attached to certain parts of our model that I think we'll also use our corn red for. So we're going to be using a much smaller brush compared to normal. Unfortunately, if you've seen the other parts, you might know that I lost our All Reliable, my absolute favorite brush. We used it for a good couple of my first videos. Unfortunately, when I was moving, I managed to misplace it, and I'm still looking for it. So hopefully, one day I can find it. But we will just go in here, and you don't have to press too hard. You don't really want to get too deep into the recesses here. But using kind of the same material or method we used for the edge highlighting, we're just going to very lightly kind of press our brush onto the raised up areas here. And if you do it just right, you can very easily kind of get all the tips of the missiles there without having to worry about getting any of the kind of other areas. And we're going to do the same thing down here. It's a little bit more difficult. These missiles aren't raised up nearly as much. But very quickly and very easily, we're just going to do the exact same thing. And we'll probably end up having to go around and doing a second layer, but that's fine. Just means that our paint is thin enough that it's not going to be an issue. And perfect. Now I do have Mephiston red as well, which is a little bit brighter. If that's kind of a route you want to go, I could also highly recommend it. I think it's a great shade. It just so happens that corn red was closer on my desk, so that's the one I grabbed. And getting just a little bit more on our palette here, we're going to be moving on to some of these wires attached to our weapons. Specifically this flamer, right? Flamers need to have a lot of red, I feel like. It's kind of the classic like fuel tank thing. And this is going to be another weird angle. I do apologize, but we're going to do the best we can. Maybe, if I can figure it out. There we go. This cord in the front will keep silver, and then this cord in the back will do with our red. And it's going to be a little bit awkward to kind of get every little angle of this, but we'll try our best. And again, don't worry about getting it all on the first pass. You kind of want to do 2 layers always. Always thinner layers, not thicker layers. That's the goal. And at some point in the future, I'll do an entire video talking about how to thin your paints. I can sit here and talk about it for hours, but it's really hard to tell or even explain without doing like a proper demonstration. And it's just not something that I think I can really cover in one of these videos. While we're focused on doing models and whatnot, it just needs its own thing. And if you guys are curious a little bit more about doing these sand base effects, I did actually just put out an entire video on its own, just talking about kind of how you can mess around and get some different kind of effects going on with that. So, you know, if that's something that you're interested in and you want to see kind of what else you can do, especially with dry brushing and even using Null and Oil and some of those different shades, that is also my channel. I'll put a link probably at the end of the video, and you can check that out if you're so inclined. Our palette is getting a little bit dry here, unfortunately. At some point I want to invest in a proper wet palette. It'll help us kind of keep things from drying up while we're in the middle of painting. And we're just going to move on to the second little chord here. Now you don't have to paint this red. Maybe it's just a power chord, you know, maybe it's a fuel tank kind of thing. It's kind of whatever you want to do with it. Alright, so I did go back over all of our little areas we've already done and just made sure we did a second layer. The last thing we're going to do with our red, because I unfortunately don't have a yellow, which is what I would want to do, is this little kind of, maybe this is like a light or like a lamp kind of thing. And we're just going to be going over it kind of as carefully as we can. Try not to get that kind of raised up area. And if you do manage to get that kind of cage in front of it, don't worry too much about it. It's very easy to go back over using that same edge highlighting technique and just getting a little bit more lead belcher on. But I think overall we kind of were pretty precise about that, pretty clean. So I'll take it. It's pretty decent. And we're going to be moving on to our next color, which unfortunately this is just a layer paint, but it should still work. We might just have to kind of go over it a couple of extra times. And this is Techless Blue. It's maybe not the right shade that we want, but we'll make it work. Make sure our palette is back to being in reach. And perfect. Kind of looking at this a little bit more as it's open. I think this will actually be kind of a perfect color for us. And we're just going to be hitting the rest of these kind of little nooks and crannies that we didn't get last time. These two little sensor light things. Maybe they're lenses. Maybe they're like a targeting thing. I don't really know. But we're going to paint them blue either way. If I can work with the weird angles as always. Perfect. And then we have a second one up here just by our missile launcher. And this actually went on much easier than I thought it would. I thought it would take a couple of layers, but I think it's actually pretty good with just the one. We'll just kind of make sure that we get full coverage there. Perfect. So now we're going to be moving on to just kind of finishing up generally the rest of the model here, just with our dry brushing. And we'll be coming back with the Null and Oil just to do kind of some of the recesses. But overall, this is actually kind of our finished product here for the most part. So the rest of it is just kind of cleanup and you know, improving what we already have. And as I get my Nurgling Green back out, if you watch one of the last parts, I showed how we kind of did some of the edge highlighting here using dry brushes. Very easy technique to do. It's a little bit finicky with some of these kind of smaller edges, but we're going to do our best here. Make sure our brush is nice and applied. And just very lightly pressing on these edges. It's not a very fine art, but it is very easy. And just every kind of raised edge that you see, you can do this with. And this might take a couple of passes. This is actually kind of our second, maybe even third time doing the same spot, but it does kind of help bring out more every time. Perfect. And you can also do this just with flat edges here, where your model actually ends, and it's much easier to do. But it's the same thing. just very gently. And as your brush runs out of pigment here, you can press a little bit harder. You just don't want too much of it going on your model at once, otherwise it will start to look pretty messy. But we're going to just generally do this everywhere we can, just every little edge and nook and cranny that we can reach. And this will kind of give your model more of like a kind of pop to it. You don't have to do this, but it does help kind of bring out a lot of your definition, and just it makes it look much more detailed. And it's a very cheap and easy way to do it. So if you don't want to do manual shading or anything too fancy in terms of technique, this is a very quick and easy way to get that kind of desired effect. We're going to be doing this on the legs as well. It's kind of less important the more into the shaded areas you go, but it's still nice just to get at least a little bit of coverage here. And you can actually see it's a little bit messy down here. I kind of like the effect it gives though, so I think I'm going to leave it. It looks a little bit like the paint's getting like worn, right? Like he's been marching through some brush and it's been scraping the paint off. So pretty nice effect, even though it's not intended. So I think we'll keep it. It kind of gives a little bit more character to our guy here. And we will once again fill up our brush. It's my only problem with dry brushing is you're just constantly adding more to your brush, just over and over again. And again, going back over those same areas we already hit. Nothing too crazy. Just making sure we get every edge we can. Especially here, front and center. That's where most people's attention is going to be. That's kind of where we want the most detail to be. And it's a little bit awkward with these smaller raised up areas, but you can still manage it pretty well. You just have to be a little bit more careful with it. So I am going to do a little bit of a jump cut here, and I'm going to finish up kind of the rest of these little edges and ridges. But we'll be right back, and hopefully it'll look a little bit nicer. Moving on to our very last step here, we are going to be applying Null Oil to all of our kind of metallic areas. And this helps not only give it a little bit more definition, kind of with being in the recesses, but also gives it a little bit of a shine. So we're just going to be moving into everything that's silver. Very, very quick, very easy. And just, you don't have to be too clean about this. You just, want to get roughly the right areas, right? And unfortunately, our paint pot is running dry a little bit, so I do have to manually go in and do this. But we're just going to be applying this very liberally all over, kind of as much as we can, everything we can reach, especially on these coils. And you can see I've done a whole bunch of extra dry brushing now, just wherever I could. It actually took me quite a decent amount of time. So if you are in the middle of dry brushing and you're thinking that it's taking forever, that's because it does. Dry brushing, if you really go in and you do every edge, it can take quite a while, so don't be discouraged by that. But in the end, the result kind of speaks for itself. I think it looks great. It's a good way of just making your model look that much better. And it's one step closer to parade ready, right? Getting away from just your standard battlefield, battle line trooper, and making your guy just very special in his own way. And I think this is kind of the last of what we need to hit here. Just getting into the plasma gun and the arm, the shoulder piece. And so we can go ahead and take a little bit of a finished look at our model here. For our thumbnail video, I am going to go up and clean the rest of this base layer. But overall, this is actually our finished product. As you can see, he looks very nice, very neat. I'm really proud of him. It's been kind of a longer series compared to just our normal stuff, but it is a bigger model. And overall, I've had kind of a blast with this guy. So if you don't have this unit, definitely check it out, or get the Brutalis Dreadnought if you want something that's a little bit easier, much less parts involved in making that one. So check them out. Dreadnoughts are a lot of fun. If you've enjoyed the series and you feel like you've learned something, or maybe just some general overall feedback, feel free to leave a comment, maybe like and subscribe. I also have a Patreon. If you like this video and you want to see much more like it, subscribing to that kind of helps me do more stuff more often. So, consider that if you enjoyed this. Other than that, I want to thank you guys very much for watching. It's been a fun little journey we've been on, and hopefully I will see you guys in the next video.